The red carpet shimmered under the golden lights of downtown Los Angeles. Cameras flashed like fireworks, capturing the entrance of athletes, actors, and moguls dressed in their finest. It was the annual Unity Gala, one of the most exclusive charity events in the city, a place where status was worn as boldly as tuxedos and designer gowns. Andre Johnson adjusted his jacket as he stepped out of the car. This was his first time attending such a high-profile event. At 33, Andre had built a solid reputation as a tech entrepreneur and philanthropist, but outside of niche business circles, he was relatively unknown. Tonight wasn't about fame, though. It was about potential. A former mentor, now a high-profile investor, had extended an invitation, hinting that tonight could open big doors. Andre took a breath and began walking the carpet. He smiled politely at a few photographers who barely looked his way. In this world, faces like his, young, black, unfamiliar, didn't often draw flashes unless they were already famous. Still, he moved forward with quiet confidence. Before we dive deeper into this powerful story of injustice, loyalty, and unexpected courage, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We bring you real-life stories that challenge assumptions and highlight resilience where it's least expected. Inside the venue, chandeliers sparkled above tables adorned with gold-trimmed name cards. Andre scanned the room for familiar faces, eventually spotting the man who had invited him, Marcus Felton, a venture capitalist known for betting early on underrepresented founders. Andre began weaving through the crowd, careful not to bump into the elite guests sipping champagne and exchanging glossy smiles. As he approached Marcus, a sudden hand tapped his shoulder. A security guard, tall and stern, blocked his path. "Excuse me, sir, may I see your invitation?" Andre blinked, caught off guard. Around him, other guests moved freely. No interruptions, no ID checks. "Of course," he said, keeping his voice steady. He reached into his blazer pocket and pulled out the invitation card, embossed and pristine. The guard studied it. "This checks out." "Just doing our job." Andre gave a tight nod, but his mind was already spinning. Why him? Why now? And why, despite his credentials, was he still being treated like an outsider? A few nearby guests had paused their conversations. One woman raised an eyebrow. Another whispered something to the person beside her. Andre could feel the gaze of judgment, some confused, others smug. He slid the card back into his pocket and kept walking. He reached Marcus, who seemed unaware of the moment that had just passed. They exchanged pleasantries and took their seats near the front of the room. But the moment lingered, heavy, in Andre's chest. Not just the embarrassment, but the familiar taste of being underestimated. Again. Across the room, sitting near the stage, was Magic Johnson. Dressed sharply, he was engaged in quiet conversation but had clearly noticed the interaction. He didn't intervene, didn't make a scene, but his eyes followed Andre, watching the young man's measured composure. Magic had seen this before, far too many times, and as he sat back in his chair, his mind began to stir. The night carried on. Speeches were scheduled. Auctions were about to begin. But the spark had already been lit. Something deeper was unfolding quietly in the background, and soon the world would be watching. The ballroom buzzed with conversation, laughter, and the soft clinking of champagne glasses. Andre tried to focus on Marcus's words, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the encounter with security. The way the guard's voice cut through the ambient warmth. The cold glance, the assumption. He hadn't caused a scene, hadn't raised his voice. Still, the humiliation clung to him like static. Moments later, Andre excused himself from the table. He wanted to greet someone he admired from afar, Brandon Kessler, a major investor known for backing social impact ventures. Kessler stood near the far end of the room, chatting with two others. Andre waited for a pause, then approached with a respectful nod. "Mr. Kessler, my name is Andre Johnson. I just wanted to say I admire your work, especially the project you did with..." Before he could finish, a voice interrupted. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step back." It was another security guard, different from the first, but with the same tone, same presumption. the same doubt. Andre froze. Kessler turned his head, slightly puzzled, then looked away. The moment had passed. The chance to connect dissolved into awkward silence. Around them, a few guests had taken notice. A man at a nearby table leaned to whisper something. A woman raised her phone as if preparing to record just in case. Andre, steady as before, pulled out his invitation once again. The guard checked it, nodded with a grunt, and walked off. No apology, no recognition of the disrespect. Andre stood still for a second longer than necessary, then quietly returned to his seat. This time the whispers didn't stop. Phones stayed out. One person typed furiously. Another whispered, "That guy keeps getting stopped. Something's off." The tension rippled, subtle but undeniable. In a space meant to celebrate inclusion and generosity, one man had been marked twice, not for what he had done, but for how he looked and how unfamiliar his name sounded to their ears. Magic Johnson sat silently, watching. He didn't flinch, didn't speak, but his expression had shifted. A flicker of disapproval passed across his face, subtle enough to miss unless you were looking. Andre wasn't naive. He knew how perception worked in these rooms. He'd spent years building businesses, pitching to investors, proving his worth again and again. But here, in a room filled with opportunity, all of that vanished behind a single glance. No matter his accomplishments, he'd become a spectacle twice in one night. He opened his phone beneath the table, hoping to distract himself. That's when he saw the notifications. A tweet. "Who is this guy causing drama at the Unity Gala? Security's already checked him twice." A video clip. Blurry, but it showed Andre with the second guard. The caption read, "Drama brewing. This guest's acting strange. Unity Gala." The sting was sharp. Misrepresentation spread like fire, and once lit, the truth often didn't matter. In a world addicted to quick judgments, context was always the first casualty. Andre locked his phone and set it down. Across the room, Magic Johnson still hadn't looked away. His hands were folded in his lap, his gaze fixed on the young man who had been tested twice and hadn't broken. Not yet. Andre sat quietly, back straight, eyes forward. He didn't know who had filmed him or how far the story would travel, but he knew one thing. Silence wasn't the same as peace. And in that silence, something inside him had begun to shift. The music swelled, the lights dimmed. The MC stepped onto the stage. The night's main program was about to begin, but for some the real story had already started. The MC welcomed the audience with practiced charm, thanking donors and outlining the evening's goals. Polished speeches followed, delivered by polished people. Applause rose and fell in predictable waves, but a subtle tension pulsed beneath the surface. Some guests had seen the earlier incident, and more were whispering now as phones passed from hand to hand. Andre sat still, his jaw tight. He hadn't touched his drink. He hadn't said a word in 20 minutes. Then the lights shifted again. The MC's voice lifted. "And now it's our honor to welcome one of the most iconic figures in sports, business, and philanthropy. Please join me in welcoming Magic Johnson." The room erupted in cheers. Magic stood slowly, buttoned his blazer, and made his way to the podium. His steps were calm, his smile composed, but behind his eyes was a quiet fire. He didn't carry notes, he didn't need them. He began with warmth. He thanked the organizers. He praised the mission. He cracked a joke about retirement, drew some laughs, then pivoted. "But tonight," he said, voice steady, "I want to talk about something that's not on the program." The room fell still. "Earlier this evening I witnessed a moment. Some of you might have missed it. Others might have misunderstood it, but I saw it clearly." Heads turned, guests leaned forward. Andre didn't move. "I saw a man walk into this room with dignity, purpose, and an invitation in his hand," Magic continued. "And I saw that man questioned twice, not because of anything he did, but because of what some people assumed." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Magic didn't raise his voice. He didn't name names, but everyone understood. And what struck me wasn't the disrespect he faced. It was the way he handled it. Calm, professional, graceful. That's power. That's leadership. Silence blanketed the room. Phones stopped recording. People listened. You know, we throw around words like inclusion and equity. We put them on banners. But real equity means looking deeper. It means seeing people for who they are, not who you think they are based on a glance. A pause. Then softer. If we want to build real community, we must start by recognizing value where others might miss it. The audience erupted into applause, not the polite kind, but the slow, swelling kind that starts from the gut. Some clapped out of guilt, others out of admiration. A few remained silent, unsure how to feel. Andre felt his chest tighten. He hadn't expected this. He wasn't even sure Magic was referring to him until those last few lines. Now there was no doubt. After the speech, Magic returned to his seat. People rushed to thank him, to shake his hand, to be seen near him. But when he sat back down, he leaned slightly toward Andre's table. Their eyes met. A small nod passed between them. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, just acknowledgement. Andre turned to his phone again. This time his notifications looked different. Clips of Magic's speech were already circulating. Someone had posted a caption, "This is how you check a room, with class." Another read, "Magic didn't name names, but we know." A thread popped up, identifying Andre as the man in question. A well-known athlete tweeted, "He handled that better than most of us would." Respect. The tide was shifting. The same platforms that had misjudged him hours earlier were now rallying behind him, not because he had demanded it, but because someone powerful had told the truth, and people listened. Andre exhaled slowly. The weight was still there, but something else had begun to rise in its place, a murmur of redemption. The next morning, Andre awoke to a phone vibrating non-stop on the nightstand. Messages, calls, emails. His world had shifted overnight. His name was trending. Not because of an app launch or a funding round, but because he'd stood quietly while the world tried to reduce him, and someone with power had decided not to let that stand. The clip of Magic's speech had gone viral, with millions of views by sunrise. The tone was overwhelmingly supportive. Strangers called Andre courageous. Commenters dissected every second of the speech, praising the grace shown by both men. Public figures chimed in, athletes, CEOs, actors. One tweet from a Grammy-winning artist read, "Class personified, Andre Johnson, I see you." We all do now. Andre's inbox filled with interview requests, national news outlets, business journals, podcasts focused on race and leadership. But Andre didn't rush to respond. Instead, he took his time, crafting a short but heartfelt message across his social platforms. He wrote about the pain of being misjudged, about how often it happened in rooms like that, quietly, professionally, but no less cutting. He wrote about the internal decision to stay calm, even when every instinct urged him to react. And he thanked Magic Johnson, not just for the speech, but for seeing him. The post went viral within an hour. He didn't play the victim, he didn't rage. He told the truth, and he did it with clarity. Soon phone calls began arriving with a different energy. Investors who'd never returned his emails wanted to talk. Event organizers apologized. Influencers asked for interviews. But one message stood out: Brandon Kessler. The investor Andre had tried to approach that night, the one interrupted by security, sent a direct email. Short, direct. "I regret not realizing what was happening. Your composure said more than any pitch ever could. Let's talk next week." Andre stared at the screen for a long moment before responding with a simple, "I'd like that. Thank you." He didn't need validation from people like Kessler, but being seen for who he truly was, especially after being seen for what he wasn't, meant more than he expected. Meanwhile, his non-profit began receiving attention. Donations increased overnight. A school district reached out, asking if Andre's team could bring their mentorship program to 3 underserved campuses. News articles highlighted his work, not his wardrobe or his presence at a gala. He'd come to the Unity Gala hoping to make a few connections. He never imagined the moment that nearly ruined his night would be the same one that changed his path. Still, it wasn't just the outcome that mattered. It was the clarity that came with it. Andre had long known that the world didn't always meet dignity with respect. But what he learned that night was how powerful it could be to hold your ground. Not just to protect your name, but to remind others of what's possible when you don't let the world define you. He wasn't angry anymore. Not because the incident didn't matter, but because it no longer owned him. The incident had passed, but the message remained. And that message, spoken softly, broadcast loudly, had found its way into places Andre could never have reached on his own. And now eyes were on him, but for the first time they were seeing the full picture. 1 year later, the Unity Gala looked the same on the surface. Same red carpet, same elegant decor, same flashes from cameras capturing names the world already knew. But something had shifted beneath the surface. Conversations were different, intentions sharper, and the night's energy pulsed with a quieter awareness. Andre Johnson stood near the entrance, this time not as a guest wondering if he belonged, but as a recognized leader and invited speaker. His non-profit had expanded to 6 cities. He'd spoken at universities, launched scholarships, and been profiled by national outlets not for controversy but for vision. When his name was called, applause filled the ballroom, sincere, sustained, unmistakably proud. Magic Johnson stepped up first, taking the microphone briefly, smiling as he looked toward Andre. "Last year," he began, "I told this room that if we want to build real community, we have to see people fully. Tonight you'll hear from a man who doesn't just understand that, he lives it." Then he stepped aside. Andre took the stage. He didn't talk about the incident. He didn't mention the security guards or the tweets. He talked about impact, about perseverance, about what it meant to lead when no one's clapping and when everyone is watching. His voice was steady, his presence undeniable. The speech wasn't long. It didn't need to be. The story had already been told by his work, by his growth, by how he carried himself every day since that night. When he stepped down, people stood to applaud, not because he was famous, but because they respected him, because they understood. Some came up afterward to thank him. Others simply nodded in acknowledgement, the way Magic had done 1 year before. Andre smiled, grateful but grounded. Later, as the crowd thinned and the night wound down, Magic found him again. "You changed more than the story, man," he said. "You changed how people listen." Andre nodded. "I just tried to be ready when it was time." Magic smiled. "And you were." The night ended without fanfare. No viral moment, no tension, just something rare and powerful, peace earned. Before we close this powerful chapter, if this story has moved you, take a second to subscribe to our channel. Stories like Andre's remind us what real character looks like when no one expects it. And we have many more stories that deserve to be heard. Andre Johnson didn't ask for attention. He didn't seek a platform. He didn't want to go viral. But when the moment found him, he met it with clarity. And what followed was more than public recognition. It was purpose amplified. The real legacy of that night wasn't a trending clip or a viral quote. It was the way people started to ask different questions, to look a little longer, to wonder who they were overlooking in rooms that claimed to welcome everyone. Andre's story isn't just about redemption, it's about transformation. It's about what happens when strength is quiet, but never invisible. When truth is patient but unstoppable, he walked into that gala unknown. He walked out seen. And now, a year later, he wasn't just invited back. He was part of the story being told, a story still unfolding. If this journey resonated with you, click the video on your screen now to discover another unforgettable transformation. Because sometimes, the smallest moments leave the deepest impact.